Joe, were you kidnapped in Africa? Was
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How much you had to give up for ransom?
He got the biggest payday of his career and almost didn't make it home. When Fat Joe accepted a show in Luanda, Angola, it seemed like easy money. One performance, overseas, more than he'd ever been paid for a single night. He flew out, did the show, and then waited to leave. And waited, and waited. The promoter behind the event wasn't just some businessman. It was a former warlord named Raquinho, a man so feared during Angola's civil war that locals wouldn't make eye contact when serving him food. Passports weren't moving, flights weren't getting confirmed, excuses kept stacking. Then the US Embassy approached Joe quietly and handed him a card. They asked if he knew who he was dealing with, and then they told him the same promoter had previously held DMX under similar circumstances. That's when it stopped feeling like a business delay. Joe was told they could extract him from a parking garage at any moment, but pride kicked in. He didn't want to look scared. Busta Rhymes was there too, and Joe said he had to calm him down because the energy was shifting fast. 2 weeks passed before Raquinho finally let them leave. Joe made it home with the money. But here's what that experience reveals about the man. He had already survived things most people never face. Kidnapping in Africa, street wars, prison, a $20 million lawsuit, and something far more personal. A moment in a hospital room when he was 19 years old that quietly changed everything. Before any of that, there was the Bronx. Joseph Cartagena grew up in the Forest Houses projects in the Morrisania section of the South Bronx. His father was Cuban, his mother Puerto Rican. His dad did time and wasn't always around. The streets filled the gaps fast. Joe has admitted openly he was stealing as a teenager, bullying, hustling, doing what survival demanded in that environment. By the early 90s, he had transformed into an MC. His 1993 debut Represent planted a flag. But music didn't erase his reputation in those streets. It amplified it. Terror Squad, his rap collective featuring Big Pun and Remy Ma, moved like a unit, and his name started carrying weight beyond just records. But none of that prepared him for what happened in a hospital room before any of it mattered. When Joe was 19, his son Joey was born. Doctors walked in and delivered news that shifted everything. Joey had Down syndrome. He would later also be diagnosed with autism. And then Joey's mother said she couldn't handle it. She wanted to give the baby up for adoption. Joe has spoken about this moment in multiple interviews, including on Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharpe. According to him, his own mother stepped in immediately, flat out refused, no debate, no discussion. That child was not going anywhere. And Joey's mother walked away, never came back, never visited, never tried to reconnect. A 19-year-old kid from the Bronx, still figuring out his own life, was now responsible for raising a child with special needs, with no roadmap and no safety net. Just family. He leaned on his parents. They leaned on him. And together, they raised Joey. Joe calls him his greatest blessing. The happiest person he's ever met. Always smiling, always full of love. No bitterness, no darkness. In April 2022, during World Autism Awareness Month, Joe went on ABC News and encouraged families to embrace their children fully. No shame, no hiding. That vulnerability surprised a lot of people who only knew the 300 brolic image, but that's the reality behind it. A father going to therapy appointments and school meetings while also navigating one of hip-hop's most dangerous careers. The streets built him tough. Fatherhood built him patient. And patience was something he needed, because the industry was about to test him in ways the streets hadn't. The tension between Fat Joe and 50 Cent wasn't just about bars. It was about loyalty. In the early 2000s, Joe stood firmly beside Ja Rule during Ja's war with 50 and G-Unit. He had chemistry with Jay on records like What's Love, and when lines were drawn, he chose a side. In 2005, 50 dropped Piggy Bank with shots aimed directly at Joe and Jadakiss. Joe fired back with My Fofo. The records weren't subtle. They were personal. The tension went beyond music. Near run-ins at award shows, crews moving carefully at events, real hostility. And here's what made it sting long after the records faded. Joe has openly said that beef cost him a potential $20 million Air Jordan deal. A Reebok partnership also disappeared. Corporate brands don't gamble on street wars. They pulled out. $20 million. Gone. Not because of lack of talent. Because ego and loyalty collided at the wrong moment. For years, the tension simmered, Then in 2012, at a BET tribute honoring their late friend Chris Lighty, something shifted. Both men recognized the bigger picture. They embraced publicly. Since then, Joe has called 50 family and they've shared stages. But the lesson stayed with him. Sometimes winning the street battle means losing the corporate war. Not all his conflicts were that calculated, though. Some were just wild. Back in the early 2000s, Joe dropped a lyric referencing Roy Jones Jr. right after Roy suffered a brutal knockout loss to Antonio Tarver. Weeks later, at a J. Rule event in New York, Joe walked off stage and came face to face with Roy. And he wasn't alone. Roy had 8 guys with him. No cameras, no Instagram, just tension. Joe later admitted he knew immediately. If Roy landed clean, it was over. This wasn't rap beef. This was a professional fighter. He tried to smooth it over, told Roy it was just music, just entertainment. Roy wasn't smiling. And then Mike Tyson appeared out of nowhere, fresh out of prison, took off his Gucci loafers, barefoot, and started moving toward the situation like he was ready to go. Security froze. Nobody wanted Mike Tyson involved. Joe told Roy straight there were 150 terror squad members in that building, and they wouldn't fight clean. Roy looked around, then he left. A week later at the Super Bowl, they ran into each other again. This time, drinks, handshakes, peace. But that moment captures the environment Joe moved in. One lyric, real-life consequences, real danger. He kept building through all of it. More records, more influence, more connections. In 2013, he served 4 months in federal prison for tax issues tied to $3.3 million in unreported earnings. He came out, rebuilt, and by the mid-2000s had fully transitioned into an elder statesman of the culture, respected by new and old artists alike. Then in June 2025, his former hype man Terrence T.A. Dixon filed a $20 million federal lawsuit in New York. The complaint was over 150 pages and included accusations of coercion, financial exploitation, unpaid royalties, intimidation, and denied credit on records, including lean back, serious allegations, federal filing. Joe didn't stay quiet. Before the lawsuit went public, he had already filed his own suit accusing Dixon of extortion and defamation. He called the claims disgusting lies and framed them as an attack on his name and his identity as a family man. His legal team labeled the allegations fabricated and described them as retaliation after Dixon allegedly demanded money. Then Dixon's attorney was arrested in an unrelated incident involving a process server during the legal back and forth, adding another layer of chaos to an already messy situation. As of 2026, the case remains unresolved. No verdict. No final ruling. Just tension hanging over a legacy that took decades to build. And that's the uncomfortable part. Joe has survived Angola. He survived rap wars. He survived prison. He survived the kind of industry politics that buried careers far more powerful than his. But in 2026, reputation moves faster than facts. One lawsuit, even unresolved, can reshape public perception overnight. Joe built his brand on loyalty, on being solid, on being family first. Now he's fighting to protect that image in a media climate that doesn't wait for verdicts before forming opinions. Strip away all of it, though. The chains, the beefs, the lawsuits, the headlines, and what's left is still the same thing it always was, a father who refused to walk away. When Joey's mother left and everyone else could have looked the other way, Joe didn't. His family didn't. They showed up every single day for a child the world didn't expect him to fight for. While he was navigating rap wars and overseas chaos and federal charges, he was also going to school meetings, sitting in therapy waiting rooms, learning how to communicate differently. The streets trained him for survival. Fatherhood taught him what was actually worth surviving for, and when everything else fades, the diss tracks, the court filings, the Angola stories, that's the part of Fat Joe's legacy that doesn't need a verdict. It just needs to be told.